Hey folks! Today's review is going to be a bit more relaxed than the norm. The reason for this is due to the review key I received from Toge Productions, so I could dive into their caffeine-infused visual novel, Coffee Talk. See, it's a bit mellower than the crux of the content I crunched through, and since I did this one during my downtime, it's going to be a surprise even for fans of my stream. Was I all too happy to savor the story, or did I wind up feeling Coffee Talk was in need of a good roast? I'm your host Arlyeon. Let's find out together. Welcome to Seattle. The air is crisp, the streets are busy, and on a lone corner there exists a quaint little coffee shop which only opens at night. It's here that our erstwhile barista ekes out a living serving Java to the usual suspects. Aspiring writers, exhausted cops, and the occasional werewolf. Okay, so it's Seattle, but maybe not our Seattle, given the population is a bit more diverse. This is a world where creatures of hell didn't simply fade into myth, where orcs, succubi, and even deep-sea denizens work together to find a place within society, so that we could finally live in an age where hipster elves were reality. I feel strangely deprived, as though I was only a hairbreadth away from a dystopian future run by soulless megacorporations. Though, given it's a reflection of modern-day society, maybe I only have to squint a little bit. Anyways, I think the best way I could sum up Coffee Talk narratively is a slice of life, albeit with a few fantastical elements thrown in for flavor. Since the game goes out of its way to point out that, in a hypothetical world without different species, people would still find something to fight over. Ah yes, how very meta. Allow me to just prop the fourth wall back up for you. Snark aside, I did actually find myself nodding along as I followed the various day-to-day problems of the cafe's patrons. The gamut's actually pretty broad there, like watching a couple awkwardly try and navigate the uncertainties of their relationship, or a writer struggling with the creative process and burning themselves out in real time. Hell, you even have a plotline which follows the issues of being a creator in the indie space. Okay, so the latter one seems to be a bit on the nose there too, Toge Productions. Still, at the end of the day, it does have a pretty neat story to tell, and yet there's something about it that bothers me. See, part of Coffee Talk's premise is that it's a visual novel whose story branches out depending on what drinks you serve your clients. It's a premise I'm not entirely familiar with, given I had the pleasure of going through Sukaban Games' bartending visual novel, which does this and quite well at that. Suffice to say, that meant that Coffee Talk had a hell of a predecessor to follow in the footsteps of, and it does stumble on this front. See, despite what it says, Coffee Talk doesn't really branch during its main story. Characters may omit some dialogue if you feed them the wrong drink or comment on your mistake, but the overarching plot threads essentially stay the same until the game's climax. It's only when you reach this point that you'll notice differences in the epilogue, and yes, there is a bit of an Easter egg with some dialogue changing on a couple days during a second playthrough, but honestly, it was minute enough that I found myself just fast-forwarding through the chapters to see what was different since my choices felt meaningless otherwise. Like yes, there is some mechanical stuff to do in this game. Making drinks for your clients does involve both paying attention to their order as well as a bit of problem solving, since while they do make requests, the order of ingredients you put in a drink can change the outcome of what you get or even form new drinks, and they don't always request things that you've already figured out the ingredients for. It wasn't that compelling to me. Like, it's nice and all, and I like that I can mess around and make latte art, hypothetically, since I'm garbage at making anything drawing-wise, but I'll wholly admit that I wasn't overly keen on the mechanic, and the only reason I went into the endless challenge mode for coffee making was out of a sense of curiosity. Like, it is a neat opportunity to go check out the drinks which are otherwise unused in the main game, but also, why? I mean, I guess it gave me an excuse to chill and listen to the music. Like, despite my earlier gripes, I am pretty fond of the mellow soundtrack. It does a great job to provide ambient coffee shop tunes, and the fact that you can flick between the various tracks is a major plus. And it's not just the audio that's nice. Coffee Talk does look good and has a charming aesthetic to its characters, and the bonus art and comics you can find in the extras are a nice touch, both to see more of the characters in the world at large. That said, as charming as these elements were, it didn't do much to change the opinion I'd been forming of the game, which is to say, it's an interesting yet ultimately flawed premise. At the end of the day, Coffee Talk is a visual novel first and foremost, and one which follows a fairly linear path. While it alludes to the idea of you having agency through the drinks you serve, in practice, well, to give you an example, I spent a playthrough repeatedly trying to feed a cop who said he was allergic to milk. Just large glasses of pure milk. You would think, at some point, this would have provoked a very different reaction, or that characters would begin to call me out or have negatively charged interactions if I went out of my way to colossally mess up everyone's orders in the worst ways possible, every time. But no. At the end of the day, my choices failed to amount to much until the story decided it was ready to acknowledge my stupid decisions, and honestly, that was a bit disheartening because even doing all that, the way it acknowledged those poor decisions would have been the same as if I just screwed up a little bit. That, honestly, it's so disheartening, which is ultimately why I came away feeling that as a game, Coffee Talk was a bit of a fumble. It's an interesting story to be sure, but if you come into it looking to involve yourself in a complicated branching storyline, you're apt to find yourself feeling a bit burnt by the end of your experience. At the very least, I did. Anywho, thanks for tuning in. If you agree, disagree, or just have something to say to me, feel free to comment, and if you enjoy my efforts to create new indie reviews, interviews, and gaming content, hit the subscribe button and the bell so you know when there's a new release. For the Discord savvy folks, click the video description to find a link to my community, the Crit Hit Cauldron, and to my Patreon so you can support me and the other members of Crit Hit. Lastly, if you want to see me get dunked on in indie games live, check out my Twitch at twitch.tv/Arlyeon. That said, I'll catch you on the next episode of Crit Hit. Take care till then, folks.